Hello, my juicy co-creators. Lilu here. I'm with a man that you probably recognize. I'm finally sitting next to the man that channels Bashar. Darryl, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'm excited to be here in Woodland Hills with you in California and do this interview. You know how many interview suggestions I receive from all around the world saying, you must interview Bashar, but I know I'm not interviewing Bashar today, but I'm actually interviewing you, which is pretty cool.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you doing it.
So I want to know all about you and your story, how this came about, what you have learned from it, where you're at. Okay. So many questions. You've been doing this for 30 years?
Yes, 30 years. It started back in 1983. But the way it really started was 10 years before that. I had, here in LA, 2 very close broad daylight UFO sightings over LA, 1 week apart each. And each time it was a equilateral black triangular ship about 30 feet on a side. And after seeing something like that, I knew that the world was not what we were told it was. There was something else going on. So I needed to start doing research to find out what was this all about.
Well, first, what were the conditions of that?
I was driving on the freeway with my brother, my sister, a very close friend, and her brother, and we were driving back into the valley from Los Angeles. And it was just before dusk, and I spotted these lights hovering over a hotel in the distance, but I thought at first it was just an airplane or a helicopter or something. But I drew everyone's attention to it because it didn't look like it was moving at all. And as we got closer and closer and closer, we could see that it was not a plane, not a helicopter, nothing that we had ever seen before. And we finally got close enough looking up at it that we could see it was this equilateral triangle just hovering completely still over the hotel. And as soon as we passed it, it moved from the hotel to the other side of the freeway. And we came around an intersection, a connection in the freeway. So it was on my left side again. And then it just flew over the car and over across the valley and over the mountains, just smooth as glass, and disappeared. And we were all excited about that. We had seen this thing, and we were all comparing notes and making sure that, you know, we all saw the same thing. And then I was driving a week later with the same friend who was with me the first time, and we're sitting at an intersection in West Los Angeles, and suddenly the same ship, or one very much like it, just suddenly flew right over the intersection. I mean, we were amazed because it's like, why would this be happening twice in 1 week? So we actually started following it, and it was zigzagging over the neighborhood. And she was leaning out the window and telling me, you know, because there was so many trees, I couldn't exactly see where it was going. So she was saying, you know, turn left, turn right. And I was doing my best to keep up with it. And finally, she just yelled, just stop. And I hit the brakes, and we stopped and looked up. And it was only about 70 feet above the car. And then just in the blink of an eye, it just went straight up.
How big?
Again, about 30 feet on a side, but it was only about 70 feet up. So it was very close, very low. And it just disappeared straight up in the blink of an eye. So again, we looked around. We didn't see anybody on the sidewalk. No one else saw this thing that we could tell. But that's what started me going, okay, now I know there's something else going on here. So I need to find out what this is all about. I started doing research, and I came across other books on, you know, metaphysical subjects and channeling and psychic phenomenon. And
UFOs, I guess. You made some research?
And UFOs.
Did you find some similar pictures online?
You know, I did not find another report of a black equilateral triangle for at least 3 years after the sighting. It was very rare at that time. Now there are many more reports of black triangles. At the time, I'd never heard of such a thing. I always thought they were all disc-shaped or round. But it took 3 years for me to see another report of such a thing. Anyway, 10 years after the sighting, I was made aware of a channel who was conducting seminars, and I went to the seminar to listen, and I thought it was interesting information, but eventually the entity coming through that channel actually offered to teach channeling. I went into the class not because I thought it was going to be a channel. I just wanted to understand how something like that could be taught. But when I went into the class, which was basically a series of guided meditations, at one point in one meditation, I received what felt like a telepathic contact. And in that one instant, a memory actually came back of having made an agreement before this life to do this channeling with Bashar. I understood that Bashar was connected to me in a certain way as, like, in a sense, an extension of my soul. We were different souls in different times or the same soul in different time periods. And I understood that the UFO had been shown to me by him on purpose to get me to start learning what I needed to learn. So the message in my head was, now that you know you made this agreement and now that you know it's time to begin, is this something you still want to do? I had to think about it for a minute because I didn't know if I was hallucinating or imagining all this. But when this was going on in my head, the entity coming through the channel who was teaching the class stopped talking to the class at that instant and turned to me and said, there's an entity here for you if you want to begin. And I also looked over and saw that one of the classmates had somehow also picked up a little bit on what was going on. And she was drawing an image of Bashar that I was seeing in my head. So I already had two outside validations that this wasn't just my imagination. And I decided to say, well, okay, let me see where this goes and explore this. I kept channeling in the class. And then eventually a woman came along who was doing the first doctoral thesis paper on the connection between psychology and channeling. I became one of her subjects. But we would do the channelings at her house. She would invite friends over. She would take her notes as I was channeling. But the first week was like, 5 friends, and then word of mouth spread, and the second week was 10, and then the third week was 20, and it grew and grew and grew, and we had to keep doing it twice a week and 3 times a week to get all the people in. And eventually people started hearing the recordings and inviting me to different cities and different countries, and here I am 30 years later still doing it.
How would you define Bashar?
Bashar presents himself as an extraterrestrial being. He exists in another civilization. They do have a physical form. This is a telepathic connection. He's not speaking any language at all. He's just sending thoughts. I've been trained to match the frequency of those thoughts, and then it gets translated into the language that I was raised to understand, which is English. But he is connected to me. Like I said, he calls himself kind of my future self, as if he's a future incarnation and I'm a past incarnation. So he is basically saying that the reason for this information coming through at this time is not only just to help uplift us as a society, but it's also the beginning of the way they actually make contact with new civilizations. They share ideas, they share information, and they see what we do with it. And if we decide to integrate that information into our society and change ourselves in a way that makes us more compatible with their civilization, then open face-to-face contact can someday occur. But they leave it up to us to decide whether we want to integrate that information or not.
Do you need to raise your vibration to be able to hear it, or you would hear it all the time?
To be able to connect to him? Yeah, when I go into the altered state, the channeling state, there are many different things that are happening in my brain, and the frequency in my brain actually does change quite a bit. We're in the process now of actually doing a documentary on how I became a channel and who Bashar is all about. It's called First Contact, and we're in post-production right now. But one of the most exciting things we did in the documentary that we'll be showing the public for the very first time ever is I actually did a channeling session with my head wired to an EEG machine. Mm-hmm. So for the very first time, we will actually show the public what actually happens in the brain of someone who is channeling. And what we discovered is that there are profound differences between my normal waking state and the channeling state. Well, for one thing, I'll share one little tidbit with you. There is, according to the EEG professionals who were doing the recording, when everyone grows in life, when they're a child and they grow up, they develop a certain frequency in their brain that is called the dominant frequency. And once they achieve that dominant frequency, it's the rate at which your brain processes information. Once that is achieved, it's not supposed to ever change. It becomes your dominant frequency for the rest of your life. Or if it is even possible to change, it would take at least months, if not years, to change it. One of the things we noticed when Bashar came through is that my dominant frequency changed completely in an instant. That's not supposed to be possible. So that's something very new that we'll be sharing with the public, along with many other things.
What is the main message? How would you summarize it? The information that you received. These are for specifically, I mean, this is for these time in history, this moment?
Yeah, Bashar and his people understand exactly where we're at. in our process, in our evolution, in our transformational age. And they're delivering information that they believe will help us make that transition in a much more positive and a much more effortless and a much more creative way. The main crux of the information is really to take a lot of the new age concepts that we're hearing about now and really, no pun intended, bring them down to earth, in a sense, giving us a practical physics understanding of why these things work, how they work, how to use them like tools to actually create the changes in our lives we want to change. So he's taking, let's say, a typical concept that you hear nowadays, like, follow your bliss, act on your passion. And he's explaining why that works. It's not just left as an idea. He's saying this is the physics behind it. This is why it's so important to do it. This is how it works. This is how you can apply it. This is how you get the effect. So I like that his particular style of delivering this information is very grounded in practical application. And people, when they use the information, actually do get the effect, and they prove to themselves that the information actually works. It has an effect in their lives.
What are some of the components or the things that we should watch for or look or be or embody these days compared to before, and why?
Well, going off the idea of following your bliss and why that's important, basically what Bashar has been telling us is, when we feel excitement or joy or passion, that actual physical sensation is our body's interpretation or translation of the frequency of energy that actually represents our true vibrational signature. It's who we are. So anytime we're willing to actually act on something that contains that energy, then, or reflects that energy to us, we're most in alignment with our true selves. It's like a compass needle pointing to our magnetic north. So it's very important to stay in alignment with who we really are, because that's what makes life more effortless, because all the struggle and difficulty that we have in life really stems from resisting our natural selves. When we go with the flow of who we are, things are much more synchronistic, much more ecstatic, much more effortless. And that's what he's attempting to get across to us, is there's an easier way to live. There's an easier way to transform. You have to get in touch with whatever it is that may be causing resistance within you, identify whatever that definition or belief system is. But he's also letting us know it's not an empirical truth. It's just a belief that's causing the difficulty. And if we can get in touch with it and identify it, it's much easier to let it go and really hold on to beliefs that serve us instead of the ones that are representative of resistance.
How do we deal with challenges? Just by not resisting to them then, or? In
a sense, yeah. The idea is, basically what he's saying is, every single experience you have in physical reality is based on something that you've been taught either consciously or unconsciously to believe is true. It's a definition that we're holding on to. And the definition is what creates the experience we're having. Mm-hmm. Every situation, from his point of view, is fundamentally neutral. It has no built-in meaning at all. Mm-hmm. We give it the meaning, whether consciously or unconsciously. If we give something a positive meaning, no matter what anyone else's intention in that situation may be, even if it's negative, we will only get a positive effect out of it, because we only get the effect based on the meaning we give to a situation. So situations can serve double duty because they fundamentally are neutral. And it's up to us as co-creators, if you want, to decide what meaning something has in our lives. And that's what allows us to experience it either in a positive or a negative way. So when we're going through life, if we're having trouble, if we're having struggles, if we're feeling things that are really not pleasant to feel, fear, doubt, self-invalidation, and so on, he's basically saying the only reason you could be feeling those things is that somewhere in your consciousness you have a definition that is telling you that this is true about yourself in a negative way. And because you believe something negative about yourself is true, the only thing that can go with that is negative feelings, negative thoughts, negative behaviors, negative experiences. So he's saying we can use the feeling to trace back to what the definition is and find out what it is. Because since you can't have a feeling without a definition, basically saying you can use the feeling to track back, find out what the definition is by basically asking a simple question like, what would I have to believe is true about myself in this situation in order to feel the way I do? Or conversely, what am I afraid will happen in this situation if I actually allow myself to be who I prefer to be? Either way can reveal the answer to you of what that definition is if you're willing to hear the answer. One way or another, it'll come to you. And what he's saying is once you identify a definition that is out of alignment with who you are, it will immediately appear illogical and nonsensical, and you'll realize that you picked it up from somebody else. It has nothing to do with you. It might have come from your parents, your friends, your school, your society, but it really has nothing to do with you, and that's why there's resistance there. That's why there's difficulty there. So once you identify it and it appears nonsensical, you will just automatically drop it. And as soon as you drop it, things will start to change. You'll start to experience things differently. So he's, again, really explaining the mechanism of how we're creating our reality experiences and really refining it down to the specific components like a formula and how to change that equation to create a different result.
How about the soul and the soul contracts that might have been done before? Does he get into that?
He absolutely gets into soul contracts. And when you brought up the word challenges, basically what he's saying is the things that are the greatest challenges in our lives are the themes our soul chose to explore. That's why they come up. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there are definitely the idea of soul agreements, soul contracts, themes that the soul wants to explore in this life. But he's also saying it's a combination sort of the destiny of what the soul wants to experience and free will in terms of how the physical person that the soul becomes experiences that thing. So you could say the theme or the challenge that the soul wanted to experience is kind of like a hallway. And you will walk down that hallway. That is your life. It's who you are. But how you walk down that hall is up to your free will. You can run, you can fly, you can jump, you can go forwards, backwards, side to side, happy, sad, whatever you want. But you will explore the hallway. That's your destiny, but you can explore it any way you want with your free will.
What is the goal? Why our soul are here? Where are we deciding? Why are we in these bodies experiencing all of this?
Well, there can be kind of a number of answers to that. In the most fundamental sense, why we're here is to have this experience. In other words, our purpose in life is to be who we are as fully as we can, because we're unique. We're a unique perspective of creation. And by being who we are as fully as we can, we're expanding creation in the best possible way we can by allowing creation, God, goddess, all that is, whatever you want to call it, to experience our point of view as much as it possibly can, because we are made of it. We are it. We're an extension of it. We're an aspect of creation, and it's experiencing itself as our unique perspective. It doesn't take anything away from the fact that we are individuals, but it's this and that. It's that we have these individual unique lives, and we're also all the different ways that creation has of looking at itself, of experiencing itself. So our purpose really is just to be the unique experience we are. And by being ourselves as fully as we can, then we are filling that purpose to the best of our ability. At the same time, the soul itself may have specific ideas about what it needs to experience or wants to experience. And so again, it's able to have a free will choice of, well, I'm going to do this now. Well, I'm going to go with that now. I'm going to explore non-physical reality. I'm going to explore this other dimension now. I'm going to have 5 lives there now, and all that kind of thing. And so anything is valid in terms of what the soul chooses as an experience, physical or non-physical. But it all basically feeds back to creation itself, who then it gets to experience all those different perspectives of all those different things from that unique point of view that each of us is.
How did you knew that Bashar was a positive or light being entity?
My understanding of what channeling was all about and how it functioned even before he made the connection with me allowed me to know that there just wouldn't have been any reason to attract anything else. I also think that a lot of those ideas are a little bit old-fashioned and outdated in terms of the way they're explained. A lot of our definitions of metaphysical concepts still kind of come from the Middle Ages, And one of the things that Bashar is attempting to do here in this day and age is update our definitions about what metaphysical concepts are all about. So, you know, I hear people talking about, well, okay, aren't you afraid you're going to attract a negative entity or anything like that?
There are some in the universe.
Of course, there are positive and negative entities throughout the universe. But really the idea to understand is, what is the idea of channeling? The idea of channeling is to align in a connective and integrative way with something that is either more of yourself or at least reflective of more of yourself. It's a positive expanded state. So by definition, a positive expanded state cannot attract something negative, because something negative is segregative, disconnective, and reductive. It's not an expanded state. The only way you can, in a sense, express the idea of negativity is simply by having negative beliefs, fear-based beliefs that put you in the negative state, which then may align you in a sense with negative entities, but it's not like they can possess you. It's not like they can control you. All you're doing with your negative beliefs is agreeing to be like them and expressing an idea that would be similar to something they would express, like issues of control or domination or fear. But that's you doing that because of your beliefs, thinking that that's what you want to align with, or you think you have to align with that negative idea. It's a fear-based belief. Yeah. So nothing really controls you. And even in the positive channeling, nothing is controlling me. I'm making an agreement to go into a state that I could stop at any time I wanted, but I simply don't choose to because I know it's serving a positive purpose. So.
There is a lot of people following different kinds of teachings, you know, and we heard a lot of Abraham and with Jerry and Hester Hicks and all that. I mean, do they all come together? Maybe Abraham and Bashar have a chat?
That's quite possible. Who knows what's going on the other level?
How is it created?
I'm sure they do communicate on different levels. Different entities communicate with each other on different levels. Now and then I've actually done channelings with other channels who are channeling another entity while I'm channeling Bashar. And I can sense the communication going on up here so that they're choreographing what's coming through us. And it really is an orchestration. It really is a choreography. And it's like when it's their turn to talk, I just feel the energy go out. And when it's my turn to talk, it's like the wind comes back into my sails. But I can sense that they're coordinating this on a different level. So yeah, beings like that do communicate with one another. A lot of them do say similar things, but they say them in ways that maybe that person needs to hear it a little differently from Abraham instead of the way that Bashar may say it, or vice versa. So it's, you know, fundamentally all the same basic ideas when you're dealing with those positively oriented entities. But I think that people need to hear it in a certain way because of their belief system. So there are different entities explaining it in different ways in order to allow it to click with different people who come from different backgrounds and have different ways of looking at things. So that way everyone gets the message in the way they need to get it. There's no one way because there's not just one person around in the world. So different belief systems require things to be delivered in a different way.
Could that be a way for communicating? Just hearing you speak of that communication, how they communicate and how you feel it going through your body and leaving and coming back up. Could that be the next way of communicating with between human beings?
Well, I believe it eventually will be, because this is what happens with Bashar's people on his planet. Is amongst themselves they are all telepathic. He actually kind of said, you know, if you were to actually visit his planet, it would be very quiet, because almost no one is talking. They're communicating on a completely different level. So I think that we do see examples of that in our reality, but I think we will see more and more of that. And I think it's all based, again, on the idea of energy, resonance, frequency. You know that when you see people who are in love, they often have the same thoughts at the same time. They finish each other's sentences and all sorts of stuff. They know what each other is thinking. Telepathy isn't actually reading someone else's mind. It's being on the same wavelength and having the same thought at the same time. That's actually how Bashar has explained telepathy works. In fact, he actually doesn't use the word telepathy. He uses the word telempathy, because you have to have an empathic component in order to actually identify and resonate with someone at a similar frequency. And when you do that, of course you know what they're thinking, because it's your thought too. So that's why people who are in love, who are in that frequency, often know what each other are thinking. So the more we learn to love ourselves and the more we learn to love each other, I think the more we'll experience more telepathic experience on the earth.
What becomes spirituality? Spirituality has to be redefined too, awakening, enlightenment.
I don't know if it needs to be redefined. Spirituality, at least as I understand it, and as I think many people understand it, is just your personal relationship with creation. Religions are fine if that works for people, but religions are more of an institutionalized idea of a relationship where you need an intermediary between you and creation. And if that works for people as a permission slip to allow them to get in touch, then that's fine. But I think spirituality is a more directly experienced relationship where you don't need an intermediary or a ritual or a structure to define what creation is to you, for you. You just have your own definition. You have your own personal relationship. And in essence, you are a spirit. You are that. As many people have said, it's not that you're a human having a spiritual experience. You're a spirit having a human experience. So spirituality, in a sense, is just another way of saying it's our natural state or our natural relationship with creation being experienced that way without so much in-between or intermediary structure.
So eventually we could all be in contact with our higher self, like you have been.
We are all in contact with our higher selves. What we're learning to do is become more aware of it. Because there is no such thing as actually being disconnected from creation, but we can create an experience of being disconnected. The irony is you actually have to be connected in order to create an experience of disconnection. So if people just realize all they're doing is using their connection to create an experience of disconnection, then they can say, well, why not just use the connection to create an experience of connection? So it's really just a choice of where you're putting your focus and your energy. You don't have to learn to connect. You have to learn to be aware of the connection you already have. That's really the difference.
Looking into the future or being in the present?
Being in the present, because that's where everything really exists. Everything does exist now. The idea of the future, the idea of the past, it's a real experience, but it's still an illusion. Everything exists all at once. That's one of the reasons why Bashar can communicate through me, even though we consider each other like he's my future self, I'm his past self. Those are just labels. The only way this could actually happen is if we actually both existed at the same time. Perhaps we just exist on different frequencies. An analogy he often uses to describe this is like television. If you're watching one program, that doesn't mean there aren't hundreds of other programs that exist at the same time. You're just not tuned to that frequency. But if you change the channel, then you get that other program. But the one you were just watching is still running. So everything exists at once, past, future, it all exists at the same time. It's just simultaneous parallel realities that operate on different frequencies or different channels, and we get the one that we're tuned to. That's what we experience as our present. But when we change and change and change and change, we keep shifting from one present to another present to another present to another present in perspective, and that creates the illusion of time and space and change, but it all exists right now.
How can we create stability then in this connection, or just really being in tune with that all the time? Because most of the time there's little events and there's something that will come and then boom, it's like our ego self, our personality takes over.
Right. Well, that's why Bashar first and foremost says you have to first respond to everything that happens as if it's neutral. It does not automatically have meaning. You decide what the meaning is. And second, you allow yourself at every moment to do the most exciting thing you can in life, no matter what it is. Now, it doesn't have to be a career, it doesn't have to be a big project. It can just be whatever you're available to do at any moment, whatever options are there for you every moment of your life. Just act on the most exciting one to the best of your ability. The secret is you have to act on your highest excitement every moment to the best of your ability with absolutely no insistence on what the outcome should look like. Because the physical mind is limited in its perspective. It doesn't really know what the outcome actually needs to look like or how you're going to get there, but the higher mind does. So the best way to work with the higher mind is to get excited, perhaps about an image that represents an ideal reality, but stay in the state of excitement and let the image go. Because the higher mind could actually bring you a manifestation that's even better than you imagine. So sometimes people think, well, I'm holding on to this image because that's the highest image I can imagine. It may actually be the most limiting image. And you don't know that because the higher mind is capable of imagining something greater. So by acting on your excitement to the best of your ability with no insistence on the outcome or how things should look, your higher mind is then given the opportunity to do its job and use the excitement in you to bring to you, to gravitate and attract to you what is really needed, what's really necessary as the next step. And as long as you keep identifying that as truly the next step in a positive way, it's going to serve you positively, then it will lead you there. This is why.
There is where
you need to be, when you need to be there, with exactly who you need to be there with.
So no more goals, intention.
It's not so much the idea that you have to get rid of goals, but it's the idea that you have to be flexible in the way the goal manifests. And really the goal to life is the experience itself. As people say, the process is the point, the journey is the destination. It's not that you're trying to get somewhere else, it's that you're trying to be more here. That's the goal, is to be here more presently. And the reason that this works, again, as Bashar explains it, is that when you follow that formula of excitement, act on your highest excitement to the best of your ability with no assumption of the outcome, excitement becomes what he calls a complete kit. And what he means by a complete kit is this. Excitement is the driving engine of your life. It's the organizing principle of your life. It's the path of least resistance in your life. It's the thread that leads to all other expressions of excitement that need to be in your life. And it's the reflective mirror that reveals to you anything in you that's out of alignment with your excitement so that you're given an opportunity to bring it back into alignment with your excitement. So just by following the formula, this is how you allow excitement to work for you. So as the driving engine, it will keep you propelled. It will keep you acting on things. As the organizing principle, it will determine the priority of what you need to act on in what order in order for you to be actually doing the most efficient thing. It's the path of least resistance. So all the struggle goes away. You just get led where you need to be led, when you need to be led there. And it's the thread that connects to all other expressions. So even though sometimes things on the surface don't look like they're connected, if they contain excitement, the excitement is what's telling you they are connected. And by acting on what seems to be those different things, you actually may wind up coming back around and being more capable of doing the original thing you were doing, because all excitement is connected. And it is, again, the reflective mirror that shows you if you have a definition you're unaware of that's out of alignment with yourself, it's out of alignment with your excitement, excitement will bring it to your attention in some way, shape, or form. And if you're willing to find out what that is and let it go, then you'll be expanding your excitement and allowing the kit to work that much more efficiently. So it's an all-in-one self-guiding mechanism that works when you follow the formula.
Excitement and intuition are interlinked then?
Absolutely, because the more you allow yourself to be on that high-frequency resonant level that's representative of your true self, the better you are able to perceive the communications coming from your higher mind, the better you're able to perceive the synchronicity that unfolds in your life in a way that allows you to really know, really observe how everything is connected, why that all makes sense, why it's important to go in this direction as opposed to that one. Your intuition, your synchronicity increases exponentially when you stay on that resonant wavelength of your highest excitement.
Synchronicities happen for us to what? What is the purpose of them?
Synchronicity is showing you that things are all connected. Synchronicity is starting to reveal the underlying structure of existence. And it just basically is representing to you like a road marker that you're on the right path. You're in alignment with your path. That's why synchronicities happen. That's why things become so magical, because that's the way life is supposed to be. It's supposed to be magical and effortless and ecstatic. And synchronicities are suddenly your way of revealing to yourself that you're actually in alignment with your path. That's why things suddenly get so magical.
To get back in the flow again, it's a matter of being excited or being grateful. How do we little by little shift that?
An attitude of gratitude certainly helps, an attitude of being humble in this space and grateful for your existence. But again, it really just takes looking at what options are available to you at any moment. I mean, it could be as simple as saying, well, right now, I could read a book. I could take a walk on the beach. I could have lunch with a friend. Whatever the options are, which one has the most excitement that I have the greatest ability to act?
And if it's little, it's okay.
Doesn't matter, because those are the stepping stones that build to larger excitement. So that's why I'm saying, if you don't know, well, let's say I don't have an idea of what would excite me as a career. I don't have an idea of what would excite me as a long-term project. Doesn't matter. It's a step-by-step thing. So it's like, well, right now, if taking a walk on the beach is the most exciting thing I can imagine doing, act on it with no expectation that that actually has to happen. Just move in that direction to the best of your ability. Whatever needs to happen will happen. And if you keep identifying the next thing that happens in a positive way, it will serve you in a positive way. In other words, here's how the synchronicity usually works. If taking a walk on the beach is the most exciting thing you can think of right now, and you go do it, who knows who you might meet? Who knows what you might overhear? Who knows what you might see that might inspire you in some way that you wouldn't have been inspired if you had gone and done something less exciting? That's the point. The excitement is telling you this is the way to move to get the next thing you need. It may not look like it, so that's why you don't overanalyze it. You don't overthink it. Because if you start to think about it, you go, well, how can that possibly have anything to do with this? The excitement is telling you that they're linked. And if you follow the excitement, you will see how they're linked. But if you talk yourself out of it because you don't think they're linked based on how they look, you won't follow that thread, and you won't be given the opportunity to do the next exciting thing. You have to follow that thread.
A lot of teachers or a lot of things right now are related to the heart, you know, instead of the thinking or right. Together, right?
Is it be a balance? We've been taught to really overthink. And it's really about feeling your way through, feeling that expansiveness within you that is representative of that vibration. That's why, again, we're saying that passion is so important, because that's really the guiding mechanism. Thinking is fine as an augmentation, but when thinking tries to take over and thinks it has to control everything, then everything really becomes out of control. Because the idea is that you really are already in control. And if you really learn to trust your life and trust yourself and love yourself, you will experience that everything is in balance. And then the amount of thinking you need to do will take its rightful place. But you won't overthink, you won't overanalyze, you won't restrict the heart and the feeling from the guiding mechanism that it is. So, I mean, you can almost look at it, it's like saying, you know, the heart has a lower center of gravity in the body. It's more stable. The brain and the thinking is all up here, which makes you top heavy. So it's kind of like you need to kind of like lower your center of gravity so you're more stable in life, more balanced in life. And then whatever needs to be done up here will take its cue from what's going on here.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Is that how they live up there in this, I say up there, but in this different dimension? Because we hear also of intraterrestrial and extraterrestrial also, but I guess in a different plane. Is it how they live, or this is a special formula for us as human beings?
No, this is how they live. They know this works for them. They know it will work for us. We have to be the ones that accept that, though.
So it's universal.
Universal principle. Now, of course, it'll be experienced in different ways, in different dimensions. There are probably different ways in which different beings that are physical or non-physical may experience this in their reality. But the basic principle is the same for everyone. But, you know, and they are attempting to tailor it in a way for us that works within our reality context. But the fundamental principles are universal.
How many are they? Where are they? Which planet?
Bashar's people, his planet in their ancient language is called Esasani. Now, they exist in another alternate parallel reality. So we can't really see their reality because we would have to shift our frequency to go into their dimension. But to them, to themselves, they're physical, although they are becoming less and less and less so in their evolution. But if we were to overlap, let's say, their universe with our universe, their planet, their solar system exists about 500 light years in the direction of the constellation Orion, but we can't see their star because they're on a different frequency. We can't see their galaxy because they're on a different frequency. We would have to shift to their reality to see their reality as physically as we see ours. They have to shift to our reality to experience it as physically as we do, but very often they do. Case in point, the ship that I saw meant that he had to shift his ship from his dimension to our dimension in order for me to see it physically. So they can do that. We're learning to do that slowly, but they can already do that. But on their planet, they are physical. Their world is similar to Earth. It's slightly smaller, slightly less gravity, slightly more oxygen, more water. Their planet is relatively natural. They do not build cities on their planets. Their cities are their spaceships. So they've left the planet very park-like. It's very comfortable in temperature, as he's described it. They don't have seasons in the way that we do, exactly. It's mostly temperate all the time.
No pollution.
No pollution. No, none at all. They've learned to use gravity, electromagnetic energy as their power sources, light as their power sources. They used to have reality maybe a little bit closer to what we have, but they were already kind of a little bit ahead of the game because in a sense they are a hybrid race. They're a created race. And so they were given kind of a little bit of a head start. They didn't have to evolve all the way from scratch like we did. So they really are quite a bit far ahead of us in terms of their understanding and their technology at this point.
And others, because we hear of Sirius, we hear Sirius, we hear of,
and all the other civilizations. Yeah.
Where are they? How do they again interact, or do they all have specific roles?
They do all have specific roles.
And are we part of those planets too? I mean,
I think we are connected to the ones that we have heard of. We're probably connected to. That's why we've heard of them. There are many, many, many that are not necessarily immediately connected to us. And the ones that also look more like us, we actually probably are genetically related to. Because as Bashar explains it, the only reason we look like this is really because an extraterrestrial society many, 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 many thousands of years ago actually genetically manipulated the natural hominid being that evolved on this planet into what we are today. So we're already containing extraterrestrial genetics and have connections to those. And in that sense, it's not even so much that they look like us, it's that we look like them because we were made to. So we do have, let's say, cousins out there that are similar to us, that are connected to us as family. And that's one of the reasons why they're so engaged with us, is they see us as family and they're helping members of their family climb the ladder with them at whatever rate we're comfortable climbing that ladder in terms of raising our frequency. But Bashar said there are many, many alien races out there, some of which absolutely look nothing like us and which maybe we'll encounter someday, but we're not ready for them yet. We're dealing with the ones that are similar enough to us that, let's just say, we won't freak out when we meet them. And they'll have a frame of reference that we can relate to because they're similar. And that's the first step in getting us out into the cosmos and becoming part of a larger galactic family, is helping us out there by giving us an exposure to beings that are more similar to us. And then bit by bit, we'll get used to the idea that there are many forms of life out there that are so different we can probably hardly imagine what they look like.
Yeah, 'cause they didn't even need to bring that ship to you, really. I mean, they could have just came here.
Yeah, but they know what we need to see. They know at what rate we need to absorb things and in what way works best for us. So they'll present things to us in the way that they know won't be too much, too soon, too fast. Right now, the reason that they haven't landed is, in their estimation, we simply are not ready to encounter a being who exists at a frequency that is so integrated, we just wouldn't be able to relate to them. And in fact, they've actually said that they radiate at such a high frequency that if we were to be exposed to them too fast, it'd be like forcing everything in us that we're not ready to face to the surface. They said they could actually cause psychic shock in us because we have to determine at what rate we're ready to integrate our negative beliefs, our fear-based beliefs. They're helping us by giving us the information, learning to do that. But if they were to force themselves on us immediately, it would force a lot of that stuff to the surface before we're ready to integrate it. And it wouldn't necessarily be the easiest thing for us. So they're keeping their distance and watching and waiting to make sure that we're really raising our frequency, meeting them halfway so that we won't suffer societal collapse or psychic shock when face-to-face encounters actually finally really start to occur.
Space-time doesn't exist?
It exists as an experience, but it's a side effect. It's a side effect, according to Bashar, of our consciousness shifting through billions of parallel realities every second. And it's that shifting through those frozen frames that creates the illusion of time, space, and movement in much the same way that you have a film strip full of frames that have no movement, but when you run the film strip through the projector and the light projects it on a screen, you get the illusion of time and movement and change. But each of those frames has absolutely no time in it, no movement, no change at all. So he's saying parallel realities are like those frozen frames or frozen snapshots. When our consciousness shifts through them like a projector light billions of times a second, we're creating this illusion of physical reality, the illusion of time and space. So they're real as an experience, but they don't actually exist as part of the structure. They're a side effect of the structure and how our consciousness relates to the structure of existence.
But can we talk of a planetarial shift, or when the tipping point is happening? Are we going to even experience it?
Yes, we're experiencing it now. I mean, the only reason we're talking about this is because there are shifts taking place in our consciousness and in our world. But what Bashar is actually saying is you're not actually seeing the Earth change. You're seeing changes within individuals who then shift to other already existing parallel versions of Earth that are already more similar to the change they've made within themselves. The old world is still there. It still exists in its own parallel time stream, but we're not experiencing it anymore. We've actually shifted to another world that's more representative of what we prefer, and that keeps happening more and more and more and more every day. So yes, you can talk about the idea that we're shifting and tipping points and things like that, and he's saying that's fine as an effect, but what's actually happening mechanically is we're actually leaving worlds behind and going to other versions of Earth as we shift so smoothly we don't even know that we're doing it. And we think we're still on the same planet, and we think that planet changed, but it didn't. We just shifted to a new planet. And we're doing it billions of times a second as we speak.
I heard that through Dolores Cannon a little bit.
Like I said, they're all talking about the same idea. They're just talking about it in slightly different ways. But we are actually shifting to new Earths billions of times per second. That's what time is the fact that we're shifting through those realities right now.
We hear of a change in frequency and alignment of some planets, which are helping us to increase our frequency and to be more open and to be more telepathic, etc. Is that part of the experience, or it's really, again, just a matter of us because it's available already? Yeah,
it's more of a perspective. In other words, it's not that the alignments are helping us shift. It's that the shifts we're making within ourselves are reflected by the alignments. Because remember, physical reality is just an illusion. So it's not that it's doing it to us or for us. It's reflecting the changes we're making within ourselves, and as we shift into realities that are more reflective, we see alignments that are representative of changes we've made in our collective consciousness.
Well, we could talk for hours, I feel, but you're doing a documentary. When is it coming out?
Well, it'll be done probably by the end of this year, but then we're going to enter it into film festivals and see if we can't get a distributor to put it in theaters. So
2015?
Could be 2015, could be a little bit later than that. It depends on when it will get into theaters, if a distributor picks it up. If not, then of course we'll get it out there on DVD or downloads or whatever other form we can. But we're shooting for the theaters first, and we'll see what happens after that. So, but it's definitely close to being done. I'd say, yeah, by the end of the year, it'll be finished as a film.
You're going to continue doing those recording, broadcasting them?
Our Bashar events? Yes. In fact, we actually have one coming up now at the end of June on the 20th, 21st, and 22nd in Studio City. Here.
This might air after, I don't know.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. But we usually do them twice a year in LA and in a few other cities that are local. Right now, my film schedule doesn't allow me to travel too far to do them. So we usually go to cities like San Francisco or somewhere in Arizona where I can fly up in the morning, do the session, and fly back the same day, so that it's almost like I didn't leave Los Angeles. So we're doing that right now. And overall, I'd say between large events, other groups that people ask us to come and channel at, we're maybe doing 5-6 events a year. for large public events, and then I also do private channelings for people when they want to investigate things that are more personal to them and have more time to focus on their lives. Bashar will talk to them for an hour and give them whatever insights they need to help them move to the next step. So I do that. And like I said, balancing all that with film production. It's challenging, but it's fun. And that's what I love to do. That's my excitement.
What do you reply? And I know this is not very, a cool question to ask, but what do you reply to people when they say, this is something you have received, this is something that should be free?
Well, information is free. Anyone can get the same information I can get. They're not paying for the information. They're coming to us and saying, I am either not willing or not able to get this information, so will you get it for me? So they're paying for the service of bringing them the information because it costs money to put on events. So basically, we're just able to cover what we need to cover to be able to actually give the information to them in the way that they're asking us to give it to them. But information is free and anyone can get it just as I can. It doesn't cost me a thing to get it.
I'm sure you've heard that already, because this is part of the I want to say the paradigm shift. For I guess you speak about money too, or the abundance, or relationship to money. Absolutely. Just quickly, since we're in that conversation, what would be Bashar's perspective on it? Do they have money? They
don't have money in their society. His perspective, his definition of abundance is the ability to do what you need to do when you need to do it. Period. Now, abundance can come in the form of money because it exists on our planet. It can come in the form of a trade. It can come in the form of a gift. It can come in many forms. There always has to be some form of fair exchange. Energy has to have a balancing act. So there has to be a balance of an exchange, but it can come in many forms. But it's all about respect. It's all about opening up to the idea that everyone has the same abilities that I'm exhibiting. It comes down to the responsibility of really attracting what you need instead of, insisting that someone else has to do it for you. It's really being self-empowered. So the whole thing about the channeling is simply an example of self-empowerment and accessing whatever it is you need. But it just must always be accessed in a fair and balanced way that's respectful in both directions.
And this is part of the potential we need to live here.
Absolutely.
Unlimited.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lilu.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was exciting. It's fun. Thank you so much. I appreciate you doing this and helping information get out there.
Yes, that is part of what I'm supposed to do here that I feel strongly about.
It's your excitement. You're following your excitement.
Oh, man. Yes, I am. Okay, thank you. Much love to all of you watching this interview. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, please send it to whoever excites you. You would love to see them see this video. Yes, I finally got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much love. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bashar presents himself as an extraterrestrial being. He exists in another civilization. They do have a physical form. This is a telepathic connection. He's not speaking any language at all. He's just sending thoughts. I've been trained to match the frequency of those thoughts, and then it gets translated into the language that I was raised to understand, which is English. But he is connected to me. Like I said, he calls himself kind of my future self, as if he's a future incarnation and I'm a past incarnation. So he is basically saying that the reason for this information coming through at this time is not only just to help uplift us as a society, but it's also the beginning of the way they actually make contact with new civilizations. They share ideas, they share information, and they see what we do with it. And if we decide to integrate that information into our society and change ourselves in a way that makes us more compatible with their civilization, then open face-to-face contact can someday occur. But they leave it up to us to decide whether we want to integrate that information or not.
Do you need to raise your vibration to be able to hear it, or you would hear it all the time?
To be able to connect to him? Yeah, when I go into the altered state, the channeling state, there are many different things that are happening in my brain, and the frequency in my brain actually does change quite a bit. We're in the process now of actually doing a documentary on how I became a channel and who BASHAR is all about. It's called First Contact, and we're in post-production right now. But one of the most exciting things we did in the documentary that we'll be showing the public for the very first time ever.
Big.
Again, about 30 feet on a side, but it was only about 70 feet up, so it was very close, very low. And it just disappeared straight up in the blink of an eye. So again, we looked around. We didn't see anybody on the sidewalk. No one else saw this thing that we could tell. But that's what started me going, okay, now I know there's something else going on here, so I need to find out what this is all about. I started doing research, and I came across other books on, metaphysical subjects and channeling and psychic phenomenon. And
UFOs, I guess. You made some research?
And UFOs.
Did you find some similar pictures online?
I did not find another report of a black equilateral triangle for at least 3 years after the sighting. It was very rare at that time. Now there are many more reports of black triangles. At the time, I'd never heard of such a thing. I always thought they were all disc-shaped or round. But it took 3 years for me to see another report of such a thing. Anyway, 10 years after the sighting, I was made aware of a channel who was conducting seminars, and I went to the seminar to listen, and I thought it was interesting information, but eventually the entity coming through that channel actually offered to teach channeling. I went into the class not because I thought it was going to be a channel. I just wanted to understand how something like that could be taught. But when I went into the class, which was basically a series of guided meditations, at one point in one meditation, I received what felt like a telepathic contact. And in that one instant, a memory actually came back of having made an agreement before this life to do this channeling with BASHAR. I understood that BASHAR was connected, and it was just before dusk. And I spotted these lights hovering over a hotel in the distance, but I thought at first it was just an airplane or a helicopter or something. But I drew everyone's attention to it because it didn't look like it was moving at all. And as we got closer and closer and closer, we could see that it was not a plane, not a helicopter, nothing that we had ever seen before. And we finally got close enough looking up at it that we could see it was this equilateral triangle just hovering completely still over the hotel. And as soon as we passed it, it moved from the hotel to the other side of the freeway. And we came around an intersection, a connection in the freeway. So it was on my left side again. And then it just flew over the car and over across the valley and over the mountains, just smooth as glass, and disappeared. And we were all excited about that. We had seen this thing, and we were all comparing notes and making sure that, we all saw the same thing. And then I was driving a week later with the same friend who was with me the first time. And we're sitting at an intersection in West Los Angeles, and suddenly the same ship, or one very much like it, just suddenly flew right over the intersection. I mean, we were amazed because it's like, why would this be happening twice in 1 week? So we actually started following it, and it was zigzagging over the neighborhood. And she was leaning out the window and telling me, because there was so many trees, I couldn't exactly see where it was going. So she was saying, turn left, turn right. And I was doing my best to keep up with it. And finally, she just yelled, just stop. and I hit the brakes and we stopped and looked up, and it was only about 70 feet above the car. And then just in the blink of an eye, it just went straight up.
Hello, my Juicy Co-creators. Lilu here. I'm with a man that you probably recognize. I'm finally sitting next to the man that channels Bashar. Darryl, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'm excited to be here in Woodland Hills with you in California and do this interview. You know how many interview suggestions I receive from all around the world saying you must interview Bashar, but I know I'm not interviewing Bashar today, but I'm actually interviewing you, which is pretty cool.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you doing it.
So I want to know all about you and your story, how this came about, what you have learned from it, where you're at. Okay. So many questions. You've been doing this for 30 years?
Yes, 30 years. It started back in 1983. But the way it really started was 10 years before that. I had here in LA 2 very close broad daylight UFO sightings over LA 1 week apart each. And each time it was a equilateral black triangular ship about 30 feet on a side. And after seeing something like that, I knew that the world was not what we were told it was. There was something else going on. So I needed to start doing research to find out what was this all about.
Well, first, what were the conditions of that?
I was driving on the freeway with my brother, my sister, a very close friend, and her brother, and we were driving back into the valley from Los Angeles. Acted to me in a certain way as, like, in a sense, an extension of my soul. We were different souls in different times, or the same soul in different time periods. And I understood that the UFO had been shown to me by him on purpose to get me to start learning what I needed to learn. So the message in my head was, now that you know you made this agreement and now that you know it's time to begin, is this something you still want to do? I had to think about it for a minute because I didn't know if I was hallucinating or imagining all this. But when this was going on in my head, the entity coming through the channel who was teaching the class stopped talking to the class at that instant and turned to me and said, there's an entity here for you if you want to begin. And I also looked over and saw that one of the classmates had somehow also picked up a little bit on what was going on. And she was drawing an image of Bashar that I was seeing in my head. So I already had 2 outside validations that this wasn't just my imagination. And I decided to say, well, okay, let me see where this goes and explore this. I kept channeling in the class. And then eventually a woman came along who was doing the first doctoral thesis paper on the connection between psychology and channeling. I became one of her subjects. But we would do the channelings at her house. She would invite friends over. She would take her notes as I was channeling. But the first week was like, 5 friends, and then word of mouth spread, and the second week was 10, and then the third week was 20, and it grew and grew and grew, and we had to keep doing it twice a week and 3 times a week to get all the people in. And eventually people started hearing the recordings and inviting me to different cities and different countries, and here I am 30 years later still doing it.
How would you define Bashar?